We are going to get started. If there are any members of Regional Planning Commission who are in the audience, we would welcome you to come up and fill in a few seats. There are two in between Daryl Severns and our mayor, Matt Starr, and there are four over on this side. So if you are on Regional Planning Commission and would like to participate in the conversation, please feel free to come up and join us. I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to this joint meeting of the Mount Vernon City Council, the Knox County Commissioners, and the Regional Planning Commission who are located around the table. These three entities will each follow their own particular process for the adoption of this Knox Comprehensive Plan, which is not happening this evening. This particular meeting is just for these three groups to be able to engage in discussion about the work that has been done. This will allow the parties an opportunity to hear how these recommendations were created based on information that was gathered over the last nearly 11 months. The steering committee was diligent in their engagement with the community. We reached nearly 1,400 engagements. And I hope that everyone is looking forward to this discussion as this is still in process. There are comment cards if you would like to comment on the discussion that happens tonight. Those are located at the back to the left of the door along with the agenda. If you don't have a pen, we have a few that people can use. But at this point, I am going to turn it over to Jeff Gottke with the Area Development Foundation, and he will be discussing the process that we went through.
Yeah, is it me first? Oh, I guess it's me first. And then, yeah, so I'm gonna immediately. Okay, thanks for coming, everybody. Jeff Gottke, the Area Development Foundation. Since there are really four sponsoring entities of this plan, so ADFB 1, U3 being the others, we thought it would be helpful to get all the groups together in a room so they can hear and discuss and kind of have a shared understanding of what's in the plan. So that's the intent tonight. You'll be doing a lot of listening, but we also encourage a lot of talking as well, since each of you will be asked to adopt, or whatever the verb is in your entity, this particular plan. So I will begin by introducing Daryl Severns with the Regional Planning Commission to talk about what exactly a comprehensive plan is.
Okay, thank you for coming this evening. This is like Amber said, it's been a kind of a long process, but we're hopefully getting near the end of it. The comprehensive plan is a short and a long-term guide that expresses the wishes of the community. So we have done quite a bit of outreach trying to see what the wishes of the community are, so that we can put this all together. It's a guide for decision-making in governmental entities throughout the county, whether it be township, village, city, county, making decisions on the direction of the county. It is not a legally binding document. It is a guide, so that we can come back to it and look and see what people want when we're trying to make a decision about it. So that is the basic comprehensive plan that we've been working.
Sure, and I'll just add briefly, it's sort of the wellspring of lots of other documents and initiatives that may come out of it, right? Think of it as like our compass for the next however many years, usually 5 to 10. Depending on conditions. It is not legally binding, but it has been, comprehensive plans are used as the baseline or the foundation for zoning codes and land use plans and things like that. And the courts have sort of deferred to the existence of comprehensive plans when they look at decisions related to those sorts of things, zoning, land use, and such. I will also add that Knox County has a long history of planning. I learned from Jamie the other day, I'm gonna quote him, citing somebody else probably, that of the 11 counties surrounding Franklin, only 6 of them have an active comprehensive plan. Is that right, Jamie? And only 3 have really a history of comprehensive planning, right? So Knox County is included in one of those. I found in the files at the office the other day, one from 1974. Comprehensive plan phase 2. So that means there was a phase 1. So it goes back farther than that, right? So if you want to look at it, it's right here. Don't get it confused with the new one. This one's written on typewriter. This one's not. Okay. So to catch you all up on the process here, I was looking through the files. I believe I reached out to Daryl in November of 2023, sort of wrote a memo to the commissioners and regional planning in the city and was like, hey, might be time to update the comprehensive plan because conditions have changed since 2018 when the last one was done. So it sort of goes back even farther than that. But generally, between the 4 groups, we created kind of a scope of what we want to see addressed in the plan. Wrote an RFP, sent it out to regional and national planning firms, probably a dozen or so, received 6 responses, interviewed 3 candidates. They were all great. They all would have done a good job. We ended up choosing Planning Next because of their familiarity with the area. So they have done comprehensive plans for Wayne County, for Fairfield County, which you'll hear about tonight, Clinton County down Wilmington area, and the framework plan in 2022 in Western Licking County. Jamie, I'll also say, he says it too, so I can fit, owns land in Knox County, and originally thought that might be disqualifying for him. No, that's kind of a plus for you because that means like you chose to come here, right? And so you get us, right? You can help hold a mirror up to us so that we can understand ourselves better, which is essentially their role. The other thing we liked about Planning Next was that they include within their documents that you'll see tonight, there's the conservation and development map, which isn't something you see in comprehensive plans. Many and character types, which you'll see as well. But basically, you can think about character types as talk a lot about maps and colors and what views can go where, but the character types are about the 3-dimensional environment, right? And what should things look like and feel like when they're built? Because ultimately, I think that's what we all enjoy is the feel of the place. So these help to do that too. That was off script, sorry. So we selected our vendor. We entered the first round of public engagement. I'll talk about that in a second, as well as gathering input, plan development, draft development, feedback. We tested the feedback we got at a public event in November. We'll talk about that. And then here we are now, adoption, hopeful adoption by the 3 different entities, each following their own process on their own timeline, involving however they want, right? Council has their preferred method, RPC, and the commissioners have. So it won't officially be done until the last of the 3 groups formally adopt it. We will continue, however, going to community groups, asking for endorsements or letters of support, because comprehensive plans are only as good as the people who buy into them, right? And the organizations that are willing to implement them. So a broad coalition of supporters and implementers is really a best practice for implementing comprehensive plans. Just today, I was at the Owl Creek Conservancy Board reviewing this with them, and they will likely issue a support letter for this plan as well. And there will be more. So we formed a steering committee, 34 members or so. The goal was to create a broad cross-section of the community. So we considered age, education, profession, where they lived within the county, their role, what groups they may represent. And we even had a high school student and a member of the Amish community. Their role was to represent their groups, represent their region, bring the perspectives to the table, be a sounding board for the ideas in the plan, and then to mobilize their networks as well to get the word out and encourage public feedback and involvement. Okay. Round one of public participation looked like this. 600. So our method of gathering public engagement was basically four. One, through the website, we had online surveys. We had meetings in a box, which probably all of you participated in, which were just a more personalized, in-depth survey. We convened 11 different stakeholder groups that represented different segments of the county, 54 different participants there. We got feedback from the Amish community, and then we went to lots of events. I was at the fair every night. Jamie went to the farmer's market. We were both at the Music and Arts Festival, as well as distributing printed materials far and wide. I still have hundreds of cards that I will give you all, no take backs. You must take them with you to distribute at work, leave them on the counter, hand them out at Kroger, whatever you want to do with them, as well as social media, print media, and broadcast media. We all had notices there. So that was the round one participation. And this is the information, or this is the data that we got. 1,200 participants. Treasurers were like, what do you like about Knox County? If you did, that was the map with the little green dot, and then you wrote what you liked about it. Outcomes are, what do you want to see come out of the plan, right? So this is like action steps that show up here. And then the places, oh, that was the green dot, red dot, and then yellow dot. All of that, they'll probably talk about that. All of that was plotted on the map. They're great at interns. Plotted on the map, and then they wrote like what each person said about each dot. 4,100. Well, what am I trying to say? 1,100 green dots. Somebody sat there and wrote what exactly about that green dot they liked. So you can like hover over it, it'll tell you, right? Yeah. So lots of good qualitative feedback. Round two looked like this. So we got the public feedback, we got all this data that we gathered from lots of different sources, technical analysis, code reviews, existing plans, community tours, and just a ton of census, IRS, demographic, economic data, all went into this, sort of distilled all of that into some principles. We had a public event at the Woodward. There it is. There's about 100 people that showed up. And we presented the principles, we presented the feedback to test that against the public. We also had a panel discussion of 3 experts, one representing downtown development from Bell Fountain. One, the CEO of One Columbus was there talking about economic and trends. And we had a member, Dr. Howard Sachs from Kenyon, who has studied and implemented a lot of agricultural and sort of rural life policies. So they provided some perspective, again, to test all of this data as well. Okay. And out of that, we got 910 basically ratings on the principles, 712 gold ratings. We asked feedback on the principles and the goals, and then we asked map comments as well there. So I mentioned the technical analysis again. I won't go into it anymore, other than it yielded over 10,000 unique points of individual data about the county that we were able to gather through this whole process. That tells a pretty clear story. And now Jamie can tell us what that story is.
Okay.
Segue, Jeff, probably too.
So, good evening, everyone. As has been pointed out, we've been at this for a while, and think we've learned quite a bit. So our challenge, I think, for anybody who's speaking tonight is to keep this focused for you, so we're out of here by 7:30, but Bailey and I will stay as long as you would like us to, but we want to respect that timing. So Bailey and I are gonna share this section, but I want you to know that a couple of things. One is, in terms of process, we're here tonight to try to help you. So you'll see on the agenda that after each one of these items, we just want to make sure we're pausing a little bit. You can hold your questions or clarifications or comments to the end if you'd like, or you can use those breaks as a place to do that. There are comments forms for anybody who's here tonight just observing and wants to watch. We are accumulating all of the comments. The website is open. We're actively taking comments from folks right now. And when you get to the point where you're going to act on this document, you will get, the entire summary of what we have picked up. Just last week, the mayor sent us from the city engineer. He'd been looking at the document, had, half a dozen things that he wanted to make sure were on our minds. So we're accumulating that. So you will see all of that. In terms of just some general things about what we've learned, we're really clear this is not a static place, Knox County. Maybe some of you know that, but some of the sentiments, from people are, we like this place just the way it is, right? It's hard, I think, depending on where you find yourself in the county, to really appreciate the dynamic nature that's going around. You will see something here in a minute that shows a map of a land use map of residential development. And when you step back and zoom out at this place, you'll see that there's activity that's happening. You may not notice it every day. You may not notice it every week, even every month. But there's something afoot here. And dealing with that issue is the core reason, I think, why communities are planning. It's about taking stock where you are today, where you would like to be in the future, not what the trends say you want to be in the future, and then figuring out a path on how to get what you want within, obviously, the legal constructs that are out there. But this is a place, and this is the time to sort of do this work. We've worked, as Jeff mentioned, in a number of counties in Ohio and here, but we've also, our practice is a national practice. We've worked in counties like Charleston County, South Carolina. We did one of their most recent plans. Loudoun County, Virginia, which has the highest concentration of data centers in the world, and 200 more in the pipeline. So we worked in dynamic places. We've worked in places like, and this is maybe a cruel thing to share with you on a cold winter night in Ohio, but we did the land use plan for the western half of the Big Island in Hawaii, driven in large part about conservation needs, about what was happening with growth pressures to them and their unique ecosystems. So we have a perspective here that is bigger than Central Ohio, but it's rooted in trying to lift up, what are the values that a community has about place? What do the trends say about what you want to do? And then shaping a policy construct that for those trends that you like and match up with your values, what do we do about it? For those trends you don't like and are in conflict with your values, what do we do about those? So what you'll see in the document, there's a lot there. We're going to give you some highlights tonight, but we want to understand how we can best help you as you go about your formal work. We're really clear, though, that the communities who invest in planning and invest in the implementation do better. Whatever do better means. They do better fiscally, they do better because the understanding is there about what's important. There's no mystery about what policies might be. We just think it's a good thing. And you probably, for some of you who own businesses or you're just managing your life, there's a lot to be said for the planning. So, but planning is not enough. So what we want to get to, you'll see at the very end of this, is an emphasis on implementation. We want to help you move from the planning to the doing. And we have somebody here tonight, Commissioner Fix, who drove about an hour up here from Fairfield County this evening, who's here to share his stories to the extent that it's helpful to you, from somebody who adopted less than a year ago right now, a comprehensive plan. Ohio is a place that doesn't, like in terms of culture, we just finished up, there was a project for the state that was just released last week called the Strategic Transportation and Development Analysis. As part of that, we looked at all 88 counties in Ohio. Who has plans? Who doesn't have a plan? Who's ready for state investment on things like transportation improvements? The state now knows. ODOT knows. Who's ready? Who's ready for these things? And I think what you'll hear from Commissioner Fix tonight is that he has established Fairfield County as a place that's ready. Ready doesn't mean developing 500 square miles of Fairfield County. No, it means finding the right harmony between where we do want development, the kind of development we want, and then where do we conserve what is really most important to us. So I really want to get to that part, but we have some other things to do. So I'm going to ask Bailey to talk about some of the technical things that we've learned.
So Jeff went ahead and explained what we were doing with the community as we were doing community engagement. But at the same time, behind the scenes, we were completing some technical analysis to really understand what the conditions were like in Knox County when we started the plan and as we were moving through the process. So what did we find out? Some of these you may know, but it was important for us as well to kind of understand these things so we could combine our technical analysis with our community engagement and ultimately, as Jamie's going to explain, come to some of our recommendations and match within the plan. So we learned that Knox County is facing increased growth pressure, which I'm sure you all were aware of, but particularly on its western edges, mostly because of regional employment growth. We also learned that Knox County is largely defined by the rural landscape. What does this mean? Much of Knox County, 35% is dedicated as prime farmland. So, you know, very agricultural here in Knox County, but it's important to also note that recent development is beginning to reshape this. A lot more residential development, things changing as, you know, as we're moving and growing. The county is also organized around town and village centers. And I'm going to mention this later, but this is something that Knox County also truly values. The concentration of goods and services are found in those centers, and agricultural land makes up most of the in-between space in the county. Apple Valley Lake is a very unique place here in the county, and it starts as a vacation destination within the region and a location of many second homes. So it's a draw into the county, and the dynamics around it, around this intermittently occupied area, can present some unique challenges and considerations from an economic viability standpoint. The county boasts abundant parkland and natural resources. This is another thing that people here in the county truly value, and we love to hear that. Knox County boasts an impressive 16.1 acres of parkland per 1,000 people, and the national standard is 10 acres per 1,000 people. So a lot of parkland and natural resources here. Knox County is mostly automobile dependent, but alternatives exist. And Jamie's going to talk about this a little bit in recommendations too, but we've tried to kind of really unpack what these mean as we go through recommendations and actions as well. The population dynamics of Knox County and the city of Mount Vernon are essentially distinctly different. So you may think Knox County and Mount Vernon are doing the same things population-wise, but they're really different in unique places. Knox County's population is growing as Mount Vernon's, but the majority of this growth is within the 60-year-old cohort in Knox County, and in Mount Vernon, they are experiencing a growth in workforce population, so 25 to 55. So you're seeing two different growing populations there. Important to note, though, that in the city of Mount Vernon, the school age population is declining. So there are some implications of that we kind of unpack in the plan. Knox County is also going through a population transition. So more than half of Knox County residents have moved into the county since 2010. So a lot of new residents here in Knox County are really drawing people in. There's something special about the county that makes people want to be here. So we really want to build on that. 43% of homeowners have moved in since 2010, and only 15% of homeowners have been in the county since 1989. Knox County residents fill a majority of the jobs here in Knox County, about 52%, but 35% of Knox County residents leave for work elsewhere. So this is important because it really has implications on the transportation network and really understanding how people move in and around the county. And finally, Knox County is a white collar community, so the occupational mix of the county residents, we're looking at residents, is heavily weighted toward management, science, arts, sales and office, and service. So while we were looking at all of that, we were also looking at existing land use. It's a little hard, I'm sure, for some of you in the back to see, but our light green areas are our agricultural areas. And these areas in the yellow are actually rural residential. So that means that, you know, out here in these agricultural areas, we have some residences popping up, especially along some of our major roads in and out of the county.
And there's a number of reasons why that, we would think that's important to you. The values that came forward really strongly in the public engagement were about the rural nature, the rural life, the rural landscape. If these corridors, which is what people really perceive, if you think about it, like it's really that first 400 to 800 feet that really defines who you are. If that is being developed at, 2 units per acre or a unit per 2 or 5, that is going to become like what you're known as. Is that really reflecting the rural nature at some point? And again, it's happening in like very dispersed ways across 500 square miles. So it's kind of hard to perceive. But when we did this map, hearing what we were hearing from people, but seeing the phenomenon that's underway, there's a disconnect in that. You will see in the plan, in the land use element, that there are different ways to sort of still get certain kinds of housing, but also have a different impact. As Jeff said, we put a lot of effort into trying to describe character types, not just use of land. But anyway, if you really feel strongly about the rural character, the rural feel, this phenomenon is something that, should help motivate, well, what do we do about this? Thanks, Bailey. Yes.
I'm sorry, we're not taking comments from the general public at this particular meeting.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, this is mainly for discussion of these 3 entities, but we welcome your comments on the comment cards, or I'm sure that you can feel free to come up and talk at the end.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Bailey, thanks.
So I also wanted to provide some insights to what we were hearing from the public while we were completing this technical analysis. And on the left side here, we have some key themes that emerged when we asked people what they treasure. And on the right side here, we have some key themes that emerged when we asked people about what outcomes they would like to see from the plan. So some of our key themes about what people in the community treasured were a strong sense of community and family. And I'm sure that a lot of people will really relate to this to all of these as well. But we also heard that people treasure the rural atmosphere, natural beauty, and agricultural landscapes, the very abundant parks, trails, rivers, and natural areas, the vibrant downtowns with local businesses and gathering places, rich cultural amenities, including arts, music, and community events, and high-quality education opportunities from K through 12 through higher education. Again, we asked people what they wanted to see or what outcomes they would like to see in the future from this planning process. And some of the themes included enhanced parks and green space, infrastructure improvements, continued land conservation, improved and increased housing, controlled development, and a few more. So at this point, I want to pause and give you all at the table a chance to ask questions or discuss. This was the process. Jamie's going to move into how we use this information to start drafting the plan content and the draft plan that you see in front of you. But just at this moment, kind of while we're in the middle of the presentation and of the meeting, I want to give you all a chance to ask us any questions or discuss.
Just a quick question. In previous comments, it said 35% of Knox County is rural farmland. I'm not sure 35%. How do you move forward with development as you're talking and maintain the 35% of rural farmland without eating up into that percentage of farmland?
Great question.
One bit of clarification, that 35% is what's rated as prime farm.
Prime farmland.
Yeah, which as I understand is based on soil type. Is that right, Daryl? Like, if you look at like what has buildings on it versus what doesn't, it's more like 82% is open space, right? So there's just maybe a definitional difference there, but the question is probably still the same, right?
Right.
Which was, how do we balance that?
Residential, industry, commercial.
Yes.
Maintain our rural
Yeah.
landscape.
Yeah, so I would jump in here. I think there's probably, given the perceived growth pressures and the attractiveness of central Ohio, well, you're gonna have pressure, you're gonna have pressure here. What the plan says from a value standpoint, for example, is as a principle, a statement of intent, is that we want to grow inward first, right? And so there are all kind of public policy choices that the county makes, the city makes, the townships can make that either induce that kind of behavior or defeat it, right? You know, there's an expression in the planning schools about civilization follows the sewers, you know, right? You want development to happen or you don't want it to happen, you're opening things up. That is the fundamental issue in Licking County right now. For better or for worse, they can't get themselves organized on how to deal with the wastewater. As soon as they do, you know, all bets are off in terms of what happens because it's not particularly organized. But there are things you can do. There's some examples of that in the report, but I think the values that you've put forth that are in this plan are we want to strengthen the centers of Mount Vernon and the other villages, like where we've already got infrastructure in many places. And this is probably a good point to just call out the fact that your plan is unique in one way because Mount Vernon has a particular growth strategy. So if you want in the county picture to have a more efficient pattern of growth, that's your place to start. Oh, right there. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's at least one action focused on conserving prime farmland, identifying that and trying to direct growth away from that.
I think it jumped off the page at me when we read this last night, was the average price of a home that's being sold here is $275,750. The average income, household income, is $73,988. So that person, the average person making that income can afford a house of $135,000. So about the rest of people.
Yeah.
I mean, are we talking about rental units? How do we get people, if we want to attract them to Knox County,
Right,
how can they afford to come, but with the wages that they're making
right.
and having a place to live?
Right. No, that is the question of the day in not only in central Ohio, but around. It's like, what is happening to housing prices relative to wage rates? One of the beauties of a comprehensive plan, it may be obvious to you in terms of the name of it, but is the one point in time where you can look at economic development, your land use policies, your housing policies, your amenities policies, all in one time to see if they're working in concert or if they're working apart from each other. The document you said makes clear that we think housing is an economic development issue for you, right? And Commissioner Fix, not to steal any of his thunder, but I think it was in October, as part of his role in the County Commissioners Association of Ohio, helped convene a meeting in Fairfield County that included the then Lieutenant Governor Husted, who was really pushing county leadership and others to deal with the housing issue. You know, I know it's not a mystery that there's a lot that goes into housing costs, but there's also like the other end of the spectrum, and that's good paying jobs. And I know that that's a critical part of this. So your point is important. We have to figure out in this whole mix about how we can improve that. But clearly there was just an announcement last week of 500 new units here in Mount Vernon that have a more affordable price point. You know, whether it matches the market, we're going to find out. But it is bringing more housing online in a different configuration that is more efficient in terms of the per acre consumption of a particular unit that's happening.
I got a flashback in the '60s.
Okay.
When I was in college, and you could buy a house in German Village between $15,000 and $20,000.
Yeah,
And in Victorian Village, same.
yeah.
Those houses are $1 million now.
Oh, yes.
But we have houses in this town and the other villages around
Yeah,
Knox County that may need to be upgraded,
Yeah.
but they're worth something.
Yeah.
So how do we get those places?
Right.
So people can afford
Yeah.
to move in there
Yeah.
and have a place to live.
So you'll note in the Mount Vernon part, which it sounds like you read it, like this notion of trying to stabilize some neighborhoods and make it attractive. One of the things that we tried, and we're still trying to do, like in Newark, is a stronger neighborhood stabilization strategy that actually provides some support and proves a market for those established neighborhoods that already exist. A lot of people don't think what's there, but it's a lot less complicated than, trying to develop, 200 acres of land to do something. So we think that the neighborhood stabilization is fundamental to your thing. When Jeff mentioned I was on the square this summer, meeting people, talking to people, there were 3 folks in their 30s who work in the city of Columbus, but choose to live back here. 2 of them have moved, they grew up here. They're in the historic neighborhoods that are like coming or they're getting stabilized. I think part of this, and there's a strategy in here too about your image and brand. Do you want those kind of people here? And how would they know, right? What would that look like? So I think this is where a lot of these things come together about telling your story. You've got a great quality of life story here. The visitors bureau is doing great work on visitors, but there's a message in here about tell the better story here about living here, working here, raising a family, investing here. I think you've got the goods, but those neighborhoods are fundamental, and you've got them. They're already served by infrastructure. Like let's try to do that in a more fiscally responsible way.
Can I say one thing?
I knew we could have voted that.
Sorry, so
Commissioner Jeff Fix.
Jeff from Pickerington, Fairfield County Commissioner. So we face the same challenges, right? And for both of you, we focused our land use plan and growth around the villages and around the natural corridors, the major traffic corridors, where there's already development starting to happen. Part of the challenge we faced in some of our villages and in the city of Lancaster, where we've got some neighborhoods that have come of age and can be redeveloped, if you will, or made better. In so many cases, there wasn't any place for the people who own that home as they aged out, as I will soon, there wasn't any place for them to move to. So they were stuck, if you will, in the home that they had raised their family in and didn't have the patio home or the senior living facilities to move into that would allow that home then to be open up to be sold to someone in their 30s who's working in Columbus. So it's all tied together, right? You have to look at how you can build all across the entire spectrum from, affordable housing to workforce housing to starter homes, to, market rate housing to mansions and everything in between so that people can move around within those different segments and free up opportunities for other people to move in.
How about age? And looking at this document, the birth rate in Knox County has decreased.
Right.
The age of people living over the age of 80 staying here have increased. So I'm an old guy. And eventually what's going to happen, how do we deal with that age spread we're talking about? It's people age out of certain areas and youth coming in. I was in the school business for 48 years. I worry about schools, the population of schools, and how we deal with that in our education. So if we get 3 colleges here, but in our public schools, it's pretty much the same as, maybe a little less than some of our schools than what it was when I came here in '76.
Yeah.
So what do we do about that population?
You have work to do, right? I mean, this is a competitive environment. And I'm going to point out the obvious to you. Commissioner Fix is one of the counties in Central Ohio that is competing hard for jobs and people. He chose to be here tonight. If he was completely competitive, he would have found some other place to be tonight than be here helping you, because it is a competitive environment out there. So this issue about what does it take to get young people here, right? It takes jobs, it takes housing. It has to be integrated together in this work. In Ohio right now, you've probably heard this from the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. Central Ohio in the next 25 years is going to get another 1 million people. So that's the 11 counties around here, right? You're part of that, not the big bump, but you're part of that. Do you know what the rest of the counties are doing in that same period of time? A $1.7 million drag on the state. So there'll be a net loss in Ohio of 700,000 people in 25 years. So You've got to work really hard, but fortunately, to get what you want, you ought to be looking at the regional market, which I think looking here, and what is it that you want that you can help distinguish this place from others? And you've got an amenity strategy, you've got higher education institutions that a lot of these counties would be really trying to promote. Professor Sachs, yep. You know, his mind was, you guys are ripe for more anchor institutional partnerships and developing those to make your community attractive to a broader range of people. You've got the goods here, but there's a lot of work to do and it is competitive. And there are some trends that really make it challenging right now. The point that the Commissioner Fix made about aging, it's the same thing in Licking County right now. Can you crack that nut before they do? They've got folks that are aging out in their houses, but they don't want to leave their neighborhood. They don't want to leave their social connections. You don't want to lose the social cohesion that they have by virtue of that. Well, they got no place to go. Therefore, there's a clog in the system. No one's going anywhere. And a young family that might want a 4-bedroom house can't get in the market right now. But you could get ahead of them. I would love to challenge them. I'm gonna tell them Knox to get ahead of that.
Yes, it's elected office holder need to make tough decisions and not listen to the no people so much, because the no and the loud people. People that want to get elected tend to listen to them more than anybody else, I think, in my experience. And sometimes you just gotta overlook that. And it's also the big bad word of zoning. Whether you like it or not, I think we had a big issue in the county that showed that. You can't do anything you want to do on your property. You can't do everything you want to do. Whether you're a developer, a property owner, you know, in Mount Vernon, on mine, whatever, post a stamp lot, I can't start burying trash, burning tires in the backyard if I want. You just can't do those things, but as an elected office holder, you need to make decisions with a plan to compete with other counties. And that's what I think elected people are afraid to do. It's very easy to keep kicking a can down the road. I mean, Mount Vernon has experienced that issue. A lot of cans have been kicked down the road, where now we have large infrastructure projects. They're expensive, but we did change our zoning to make it easier for people to build and do infill.
Yeah.
And then with today's younger society, a lot of those people, yeah, would they like to have a house with 10 or 20 acres in the country? Probably. But many of those now, from what I read a lot of silly stuff. They are willing and wanting to live in town. And the way I look at it is, if you're marching and parading down the street, you know, climate change and stuff, you might as well be, I don't want to hear you about buying a house in the country, you should get an apartment in town. And if you don't want it, then go somewhere else and live. But a lot of those younger people, they're looking to live in town.
They want walkability.
Yes,
They want authenticity. We've spent the last 6 decades homogenizing this country.
Right.
And young people, even though they may not be able to express the yearning, they want to be in places like you are cultivating here. But you got to tell that story about what's actually happening. In that session that Commissioner Fix helped organize, that Lieutenant Governor at the time spoke at to open it up, while we were waiting, I was sitting right next to him, and he was like, Jamie, like, why don't these, you know, what happens with these plans? They're like good ideas. And I simply just said what you said, and many times it comes down to political will.
Yeah.
You've got good ideas, you've got good research, but you have to make the tough calls sometimes.
And we have a very nice community that has a lot of those features, and it's marketing.
Yeah.
For our county, but I see a lot of political will.
Yeah.
Of people, and when you look at it, even statewide, nationally, but even locally, that's what matters.
Yeah.
Is making those decisions, because you're elected to make decisions for the community, not for 10 people. Even though those 10 people are allowed.
I can help you with that.
Could Bailey put back up that map where you had all of the different locations, because I just think it's helpful for the discussion that we're having. I'm sorry, I'm not talking loud enough. I think that this just helps us see in this discussion exactly what we're talking about.
This is the existing land use map. There's a future land use map that's not as fine grained, but this is like what you have right now. And if we showed back 10 years or 60 years, whatever that was, 50 years, 50 years, it would look quite different. But this is happening at a fast rate. And you're actually, using more land per person than you have in a long, the phenomenon. In central Ohio for the 7 counties, a couple years ago, we did it before a lot of this started changing, but it was like a 3-to-1 increase in terms of the land use consumption per capita that was happening in the 7 poor counties of central Ohio. Would you like to move onto some talk about some of the recommendations or?
Are there any other questions or comments? I just don't want to pass
Yeah.
by this time.
Yeah, I was just gonna add very briefly to Bruce's question about how do we do these things? Council has already done a number of things to indicate to the development community and to bring costs down to make things more affordable. I would list them, but I don't want the commissioner taking notes and going back and then implementing them all. But I mean, if you think about the CRA housing abatement, the NCA, the zoning change, right, that makes smaller lots, the approval of the Liberty Crossing development, which includes a variety of unit types so that people can age in place. You have already done some things that will help with these problems we've talked about. So, and they're out ahead of it. Hopefully that can be replicated or emulated by some of the other communities in the county as well. That's all. So do what we do. Yeah.
I think that this map is just particularly important because we saw that the rural environment was the number one, I think, most valued thing, the most treasured thing in Knox County. And if you look at this, we are shooting ourselves in the foot if that is our end. So we are occupying all of the land directly up against every single road on every avenue into Mount Vernon. And that is why these infill lots and these higher density locations are so important, because we do value that rural community that we have in Knox County. And I just think that this is an important map to keep in mind as we're moving forward.
Great, no, that's good. So if you have other questions about this part, like before we're done, you can ask them, but maybe we just shift a little bit here to talk about, okay, what can we do by some of these? Okay? Yes. So in terms of the recommendations, the document has a hierarchy of like, how do we express the recommendations? It starts, with the vision, which is the highest, most general expression. Then it's got goals, which are desired outcomes. They don't tell you how to do it, when to do it, where to do it, but they're outcomes. These are sub themes of the objectives, and then there are specific projects, policies, and programs. And if you're reading a document and you see an action that is more suggestive than specific, we want to know, because this is what we're going to measure, what you're going to measure. Did we do it? Did we get this started? Did we get this completed? Projects, policies, and programs that go on there. So I'm going to read to you the entire chapter. No, I'm not. But I'm going to read to you the vision, because I think just the conversation we just had, the words are intentional here. But the vision, the highest level expression of the community's future, says Knox County is a place with a demonstrated, you've done it, commitment to conserving the essential town and country elements that facilitate economic prosperity, reflect genuine community values, and inspire pride. In essence, Knox County is a complete community. So when Commissioner Fix was talking about the full spectrum of housing, that's, this is the high level. We can't say everything, but a complete community has housing across a spectrum here so that people can move up and down without having to move out or compromise their lifestyle. When Councilmember Keener mentioned the edge conditions, that's the only way you have town and country if there's a distinction. If it's country, suburb, town, that's confusing, right? In a place who really loves and wants rural character. So the edge conditions are really important in saying town and country. So the words that are here mean something to us, and you should see them flow to the more detailed policy hierarchy in the document. Okay, so with that said, recommendations. So this is the map. Now, in a lot of places, if you were looking at other plans and maybe some other counties that have been prepared, you might see just a land use plan. But given what we've learned here, and not dissimilar to Fairfield County or Licking County, this notion about the conservation is really important. So we didn't start this preparing this with the steering committee by saying, oh, you need to develop here, you need to develop here. No, we started with what is important to conserve, right? You have amazing conservancies in this county that have different ways of protecting land. So we identified what those are, and then we defined the open space framework before we ever got around to talking about where's development, where's that interface happen. So this is a very important expression of that. One of the things that you'll also find in the Mount Vernon section of the plan is this sort of enlarged and a finer grain about where some of those different residential types are in the document. All of these have not only the use, but character associated with them. So that if you are going to take this step of implementing to zoning, you're already a step ahead, and there's less surprises in moving from this kind of mapping character basis into the rules that will ultimately get you what you want in this process. So the land use recommendations, the words, the projects, policies, and programs, need to be advancing what's in this actual map. I mean, so you should be able to hold, the map up and hold the recommendations up and see how they're working together. This notion about future land use planning and promoting conservation along with growth and development is not either or. You're not going to be able to do either or here. You're going to be doing both and in this process, but you're going to be doing it with a prioritized notion about what's important to you. The natural resources, you're not recreating those very easily. So how do you prioritize those protections and then become amenities? Because in the amenities standpoint, that's how you're going to continue to be competitive. Jeff mentioned, that I fell in love with Knox before I even knew this thing would ever happen. I'd be in front of you today. My grandparents, both sets, were farmers in Madison County. Anybody familiar with Madison County? Yeah, Glaciers did a great job over there. Flat, right? There's nothing like Knox County in terms of the feel of this place. And although my grandparents would be upset with me, like London and Mount Vernon don't compare. Just saying it, all right? But this notion about the amenity strategy making you competitive, you've got that. So we want to make sure we're doing that. We know that the agriculture is vital here in terms of the economy. And so the productivity, the sustainability are all baked into our land use projects, policies, and programs. We also know that the economic part is important, and Jeff and his group worked very hard at that. There was a headline I read at some point in this process that said something like, growth doesn't mean we have to give up those things we love, right? And so you can have economic development, you can be resilient, you can do well, but you also, can have this quality of life and the sense of well-being. And we're talking about basically chapters in the comprehensive plan, and we talk about resiliency, quality of life, and the mobility here is important in your work. So there are recommendations around how do people get around in the county and get to and from the county. That 35% number, would you have fewer people on your roads every day taking their sales tax potential money when they go to Fairfield or Licking County to spend their money while they're there working? If they could work here at home, that's a loss to you when they're taking that out. They're also wear and tear on your roads. So we're very much focused on the implementation part of this. And Bailey, we're ready to go to implementation. Is this the implementation section here? Is this right? Okay. So we think that the plan, in terms of recommending how to use it, is something that should be institutionalized in the county and in the city and in the RPC. When you're making decisions about whether it's capital improvements, economic incentives, whether private developers are interested in you, can you tell them what you're about in this work? Development approvals and your annual work programs. We've got clients who once they have this plan in place, every staff report has, how does this relate to, in this case, Together Knox? Show me the specific reference that says this is a good idea, that this is part of our adopted policy. This work is the work that you have is not intended to be like static until you decide to do this again, but try to institutionalize it in your work. We have a client outside of Kansas City that just redid their website. The staff cannot, all their staff reports are done online. you have to pull down a menu from the right chapter in their comprehensive plan to make your request, whether it's about a zoning issue or a budget request or a departmental work program. I'm not suggesting that you have to do that, but there is a way to bring this thing to life in your day-to-day business. One of the things that we know that people really like, and that includes residents as well as people who might invest in you, they like predictability, right? No one wants to risk their money on a process that doesn't have predictability. You basically, from this plan, you're signaling to the outside, like, hey, this is what's important to us. If you want to stabilize neighborhoods, if you've got a creative idea to come into established neighborhoods and make them more vibrant, this is a place for you to do this. If you want a development approach that is really sensitive to the natural environment and conservation, this is a place for you. This is something that we use a lot. It's just like, and you can adapt it for your own organization. But there is an annual rhythm to any government entity, right? What happens? And so, we like to think that in the beginning of the year, there might be it's a continuous thing. At the beginning of the year, you actually do a annual report, not on annual report of the government, but an annual report on what have we done to advance this plan? Have we made progress? And then report that out. If there's a state of the county, state of the city meeting, you report this out. There's 1,400 people that gave us stuff, but there has to be thousands of them that know you did this process. What are we doing? Did we make progress? Was it worth it? You evaluate the plan, you come around here, and at some point, depending on your own cycle, you're working on a capital improvements plan. You're working on your general fund plan. And you're working on getting that approved. And you just continue to work this plan over and over, but you're constantly monitoring and updating. This should not be a static thing that happens after you adopt it. So, these are some ideas that are in the plan. You'll decide whether they make sense to you. But should there be a small working group, maybe you cherry pick, I think I can say this out loud, like the steering committee, who says, yes, we believe in what this plan says. Now let's figure out how we actually get a group together. So there's this idea about a task force. Task force for us is like, it's a limited job. It's a task to do that. Progress reports on a regular basis, integration in your annual budget, create a grant finder, a coordinator position to identify where resources are. It's really hard without sort of a plan to help justify like what you're doing right now. In Wabash County, Indiana, which is just west of Fort Wayne, 4 straight decades of population decline. They just, in the last year, we've helped them at 2 different grant sources that have totaled about $20 million. Not possible without using the plan that was constructed the way it was to go after those sort of resources. They just giving me the look. So you'll find in the document, like this matrix, this is the to-do list. We try to be sensitive that not everything can be done immediately, but there are specific notions about the time frame in which it would be done, who leads it, who supports it, where potential funding exists in the work. So there's pages of this. So that is the recommendations around generally. I mean, there's 180 some pages here, but generally how we think about implementation. But we want you to be, we're in this to help you do stuff, not just to get a plan and then go on to the next place. And so that's why we think so much about this part of the work. So we'll pause right now, but then we'd like Commissioner Fix to share some other comments. Some of them I think he's probably gotten out based on what you've asked about. But are there any comments about what we're trying to do here with the projects, policies, and programs, and the conservation character map approach? Yeah.
So this draft was put together, and there has been feedback since this draft is in this form.
Yeah.
So what are you doing with that feedback?
Yeah, so we're collecting it.
And doing what? I mean, collecting it.
I was trying to answer. So earlier I said that our rhythm for collecting this is to collect all of it. Instead of producing, like this 3-month period of time, like 8 different drafts, we have one draft that everybody's seeing. And what the adopting bodies are going to get is a compilation of the comments, the online comments that are coming in, the comments that have come from the RPC's meeting, the comments that came in through tonight, the comments from the city engineer last week. There'll be a compendium of everything that's been given to us. We will then, based on that, at the adoption time, say, this is what we learned from that draft, and then here's where the amendments might be made. So it'll be a complete summary of that. There's not been a lot of activity on the website, Bailey, like 12, and we promoted that. But yeah, we're gonna take it all together, and then there will be an updated version of this with, it's annotated with everything that we've learned so far.
And the reason I ask is because Thursday is the regional planning meeting, in which this draft as is goes before regional planning, correct, Daryl? For regional planning to vote or recommend as is,
Move it on to.
as is, correct?
Yeah. But you can, Jeff, does that make sense? But you mapped out the process.
So I'm gonna send, tomorrow, I'm gonna send Jeff a spreadsheet of all the comments up to tonight or tomorrow morning. Jeff's, and I'll include Daryl, so they will get that out to the Regional Planning Commission before the hearing on Thursday. So then the idea would be that the Regional Planning Commission would either vote to send it, to forward it to the county commissioners and Mount Vernon City Council, or not, whatever direction they take, but with those comments included.
But the comment is a comment.
Here's what I think
It's
is-
an effective document.
Yeah, here's what I think, you should, like RPC, when you review this document with the comments, you could say, we support adoptions with like these concerns or these exceptions, right? So you're gonna do that. Those will come forward so that the other bodies know where your concerns were, right? And if they address those, you wanna jump in?
So then I was gonna say, so when it comes to the implementation, as we're sitting down over the next few years and we get to some of those recommendations, we think about, okay, time to pull the trigger
Yeah.
on this one, then you would suggest that we then go to the comments to see what the feedback from the public was regarding that particular, since it sounds like what you're saying is, we're not gonna like make a bunch of versions with a bunch of changes in it. We have to, we have to enshrine the suggested changes somewhere
Right.
for future reference, right?
But we're going to, there will be another version of this, right? We get what RPC is concerned about. We get what, like the city engineer, for example, had some really good comments. Like, I would not want there to be a document that didn't capture, even though there were like 6 or 7 things without that.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the commissioners and the council members, they're gonna get that version with all the comments. They're gonna get another version that says, here's the adoption version. They might still make some tweaks at that point, but basically, we will have thought we've addressed and pulled in what RPC had to say and what else we've learned. I mean, some of this is clarification that's not policy related thing. It's just like getting the tightest document. But
Yeah.
you have a complex, you're a complex group here, in terms of how this works, in Ohio. And so we've got to go with these steps, and they're not as ideal or sequenced as one might, like to have if you were creating your own structure.
This is something in the marketing. I appreciate you going out and talking to all these people and getting them. But let me give you an example. I did some consulting with a small school district, just north of Worthing, it's called Home Page.
Yeah.
And they had a building, and the kindergarten was in one end of the building, 12th grade was in the other end of the building, one building.
Yeah.
And the farmers in that area didn't want to change.
Yeah.
It was basically an
Yeah.
agrarian area, much like ours.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to change.
Yeah.
And after a while, they got offered enough money, they sold that land.
Yeah.
And it's the fastest growing school district in Ohio for the past several years.
Right.
And they're building building after building. So how do we market it? So people buy into it,
Yeah.
so they understand all the comprehensive planning that's being done, it's gonna be good for them.
Yeah.
And it's not gonna be something that's gonna hurt.
Yeah. I think part of the reason that the leadership group and the steering committee, and we went to the effort we did is. We don't like to be at the other end of the process where we're trying to sell, like we had an experience in Hillier Township in the fall where we felt like we wanted to go there and talk to them, talk to the mayor Centerburg. And some of them had not been actively involved. right? But when they saw the outcomes and the statements of intent, they were like, oh, I recognize that. That's who we are. So there wasn't much selling once we revealed what we had. Anyway,
But there's a difference between selling and marketing.
yeah,
And those terms are totally different. We're not selling something, we're marketing what's
Yeah.
good for people.
so the ongoing education,
Yes,
where's education fit in your definition? The marketing is, education is part of the marketing, is that?
right.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense to me, and I'm sorry for the confusion there. Yes,
I'm just trying to figure out how this action is implemented, and some of it sounds like possible suggestions. The action items are just being clear that court was mentioned, using the document to go to court with something, but on page 171, it says study and report on the possible implementation
Yeah.
of building codes.
Right.
So that's a possible implementation. And
Yeah.
then on page 178, it says expand industrial areas, oh, sorry, I'm wrong page. It says on page 180.
Yeah.
Update zoning code, subdivision regulations, and or design guidelines to require new developments to have a well-connected
Yeah.
street, sidewalk, and bike paths to network. So that sounds like update the codes that there has to be, and I'm a bicyclist, I love bicycling,
Yeah.
not against
yeah,
connecting new subdivisions
Yeah.
to bike paths, but it makes it sound like that we update the regulations to require the
Yeah.
bike path to be connected to new development. And then this says just to study and
Yeah.
report on
Right.
possible buildings. So I'm just trying to figure out how much of it is, this is a guideline, and how much of it is, this is an action that, like you mentioned, court, that we would have to go to court and say, well, this isn't a plan, but we don't want to do it now.
Yeah.
Is this like
So-
a document that's court worthy or
So-
requirement?
so those two examples right there, those are part of the action agenda, right? Those are not the policies, that's your to-do list. And the
Is
two,
it a we have to do, or
Nothing
an
in this,
idea?
nothing in this is binding. This is a guideline. I think you said that at the very beginning, that this is a guide to decision-making over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Now, for the city of Mount Vernon, those bike path connections are very important when we look at our communities, because we have a park network, we really want that connectivity. So for us, that is something where a new development is coming in. Yes, we may say to that new development corporation, we really want you to connect into the sidewalks or
Yeah.
into the bike paths, because that's what we're seeing that our community members want. It is not something that we would have to do, but it lines up with what we view in the future as being the most positive thing for the community.
I guess the word require.
so I just would like to clarify, for every one of those actions in there, you could put them on a scale of intensity, right? Every one of them. On the second one that you read, it was the feeling from what we had discerned from the public and the steering committee, that there was much more strong feeling about that one, so we could state it as a stronger policy. For the other one that you exampled, there was, different opinions, strong different opinions about the building code. So instead of saying institute a building code, it simply says study it for the possibility of doing it. It doesn't say institute a code, but it's basically saying we need to address this and we need to have a policy about it. We don't know in the context of the plan what that policy is, so it's not stated as specifically or strongly, but every one of those you could look at and say, this is what the sentiment was stronger, so we can be more vocal about it. So you should be picking up on the tone in that, and you did. So that's part of
Yeah,
that.
I'm not trying to be controversial,
No,
I'm
no.
trying to clarify.
Yeah, right.
So let's clarify.
So kind of on the same topic here, Brenda, specifically that. So when you said this is on your to-do list, is the study and reporting the to-do?
Yeah,
Or is
yeah.
the implementing of building codes the to-do?
No, 4.7, the one that the commissioner mentioned, 4.7 on 171, study and report on a possible, right, there's not locking you into anything. It's just saying, we've got to deal with this. We've got growth, we've got housing issues. We need to look at this, but it doesn't take an opinion on gotta have it, don't gotta have it, gotta include this.
So even like on 178, it talks about extending roads and corridors, or extending Sycamore to be a connection between the east-west connector corridor. Those are suggestions, but they're not saying, somebody could do that and say, you agree to the
Yeah,
plan, this
yeah,
is what we're doing.
Yeah. So I think what we tried was as like, this is not legally binding. It is a framework for which, you know, the leaders in this community should feel responsible for taking forward, right? No one, you know, people can sue you for the craziest stuff, like, you know, right? So, but the idea here is that you've gone through this process that is defensible in terms of what you think needs to happen in this moment in time.
There's suggestion, if we looked at it and somebody said, no, this corridor would be damaging to this or that person or whatever, it doesn't have to happen.
Yes, yeah, I mean, if you obviously, if you found things out while you were in the design of a corridor that made that corridor impossible, you can't, you're not gonna be able to change that.
I think I may have gotten out over my skis with the court thing, right?
Yeah.
Because it created a little confusion. What I meant by that was when there's zoning code updates or there's confusion within a zoning code, right? Like the zoning code is the thing that's binding, but how do you determine, or how does the court or whoever determine intent if it's unclear within the code? Then the plan intent can be referenced as sort of the foundation of the intent. Does that make sense? So it's not like a judge is gonna be like, well, right here, 1 point, you know,
That's right.
is that better?
Right. Yeah, and if you were to look at the state enabling legislation around, and we have really weak enabling legislation in the state of Ohio. This is for another night, but if you have a zoning related issue, like the first line of defense and justification comes from what is your land use plan say? If you don't have that, then it becomes slippery. Okay. So I'm wondering if this would be a good time to ask Commissioner Fix to, like, I know some things have come out, but maybe let him sort of share what he was planning to come to, but also reflecting here a bit. And then we can continue on after that. Is that good, Jeff?
Yeah, thank you. So, I do wanted to make sure I got all my thoughts down in the right order, so I'm gonna read this to you. And then I'm happy to answer any questions or any comments you have. Commissioners, council members, and mayor, Regional Planning Commission, Mr. Getke and team, and others, thank you for inviting me to speak to you this evening about Fairfield County's work with Mr. Green and planning next, and as importantly, what happens after you adopt the plan. I'm happy to share my experiences with you because, in my opinion, we're all in this together. 100 years ago, Ohio had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity as the Industrial Revolution came to the Midwest with steel and oil and auto manufacturing, among others. That Industrial Revolution changed the face of Ohio and provided opportunity for generations of Ohioans and others. This time that we're in today, the technological revolution, I believe, is akin to that time. Major employers like Intel, Honda, Anduril, and I'm sure there will be others in the coming years, all of them coming to Ohio, Central Ohio, right here. So many jobs that we don't have enough people to fill them. So many people already here today and those that are coming that will need a reasonable place to live. And so many other challenges and opportunities that we as community leaders are responsible to face. Yes, indeed, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and we owe it to ourselves and, more importantly, to those who elect us, who depend on us to do everything we can to plan for what's coming, to manage it when it gets here, and to take advantage of it so that future generations can reap the benefits. And none of us can do it alone. Jamie mentioned, why did I come up from Pickerington tonight? None of us can do this alone. There's simply too much coming at us. And we can't just rely on Columbus or Franklin County. They have their own issues to deal with. All of the counties around Central Ohio, we're all in this together. And it makes sense that we lean into each other so we can tackle these issues together. So thank you again for inviting me here tonight. I guess I shouldn't assume that all of you know a lot about Fairfield County. We have just under 200,000 residents, and geographically, if you think Pickerington over to Buckeye Lake, Lancaster is our version of Mount Vernon. Hocking Hills to the southeast and not far from Circleville. Forgive me for my ignorance about your process and how it's worked this far, but congratulations on recognizing the need for an updated plan and for engaging a group in planning next that I think we're fortunate to have right here in Central Ohio. I believe they're one of the best in the country. Our process in Fairfield County pre-adoption involved meeting individually with our 13 townships, each of our 13 villages, our school superintendents, in our Farm Bureau. We visited all those groups because the first edition of our plan, where you are tonight, was wildly unpopular and really poorly received. We did all the engagement things that you all have described here tonight. It turns out that while people have an interest in the future of your area, perhaps not enough interest to fully engage in the process until the agricultural community is misled to believe that you're going to take all their land and turn it into high-rise housing projects. Then you'll have 250 or so of them show up and shout at you. I'm exaggerating a bit on what they were led to believe, but not about the number of angry farmers that showed up to scold me when we tried to adopt it as you're talking about doing next week. So we decided to pull back our plan and go to the public and our local elected officials and force some engagement by showing up at their meetings. That really worked and completely changed the dynamic. Engaging our townships and villages one-on-one was the most important thing we did in this whole process. Only after having 3 months of those individual meetings and incorporating all of that feedback into our plan, did we have a final version that everyone was comfortable with. It's important to note that we wrote our plan purposefully in a way that made it easy for a township or village to take our plan and adopt it for their own community, or short of that, to take pieces of it to create their own plan. I should take a step back and say that the original idea behind the plan was to provide our townships and villages with this tool that they could use for their own plans. When convinced after a housing summit that the county hosted in 2023 that it would be wise for them to have their own land use plan, the townships and villages turned to the county commissioners for help, noting that they had neither the expertise or the financial resources to do this work on their own. So the county decided to update our then 5-year-old comprehensive land use plan, land use and economic development plan, in a way that could be easily adapted to the individual townships and villages. So we did the work to get the plan right, and our regional planning commission approved it, and the commissioners adopted it in the spring of last year. And all of that was the easy part. So we're clear, townships and villages, because they control zoning, hold all the cards when it comes to growth. If they're not on board, if they want to fight growth, or worse, stick their heads in the sand and hope it goes away, if any of those things happen, none of this will work. Instead of planning for growth, managing it, and taking advantage of it as it occurs, instead, growth will happen to you. If you don't plan for it, manage it, and take advantage of it, it will happen to you. I've lived in Pickerington for nearly 30 years. When I moved in Pickerington and Violet Township combined, 20,000 people. We moved to Pickerington so long ago because the schools were great, the taxes were reasonable, and we liked being on the east side of Columbus 30 years ago. Today, Pickerington and Violet Township house more than 50,000 people. To go to work, it takes me 20 minutes to get out of Pickerington and another 20 minutes to get all the way across town to Hilliard. Our taxes are the highest in Fairfield County by far, and short of New Albany, Bexley, Arlington, and Dublin, some of the highest in Central Ohio. This all happened because our community leaders way back then had no plan for growth and refused to work together. Violet Township tried to build a fence around the city of Pickerington, and that was the most wildly unsuccessful venture you could imagine. 40 years of land wars continue to this day, to the point that we have 12 subdivisions in some form of construction right now, just in Violet Township. Growth came to Northwest Fairfield County, and without appropriate plans, developers took advantage, pitting the city against the township. Our schools are not what they once were, and our community is changing, not in a great way. Worst of all, the taxpayers are stuck with all the bills. School levies, fire levies, road levies, seems like every year we're being asked to dig into our pockets just one more time. So it's great to have a plan, but if your townships and villages don't dig in and get to work, your plan is a really nice document and not much more. The good news is that in Fairfield County, we can use the Pickerington example to scare our townships and our village councils into action, and it works. So the challenge that we have before us now is to get all of those townships and villages to either adopt our plan or create their own. To do that, we're on tour again, preaching the mantra, preserve the land and protect the taxpayers. I'm going to say that again, because it's really, really important. Preserve the land and protect the taxpayers. The feedback that we got when we were doing our work with Jamie and his team was very similar to what you got. We like our rural feel. We want to keep the farms. Don't take everything away from us. So let me explain further. Preserving the land is all about building with density. During our original tour, it became abundantly clear that our agricultural community and most of our townships were not at all interested in using up all of our prime farmland for development. The old way of doing things was for a township to try to control growth by just zoning everything either agricultural, or if they must, allow for one home on every 2 acres. That, they thought, would stop development, but it doesn't, it just spreads it out. You mentioned that. The example I've used in countless presentations around Fairfield County is that if you build 100 homes with current zoning, one home for every 2 acres, you'd use 200 acres to build those homes. And today, most townships do that. If, on the other hand, you allow for some parts of the township to be built with some level of density, say 4 homes per acre, as is common in most residential neighborhoods, those same 100 homes can be built on just 25 acres, thus preserving 175 acres of farmland. Do that 5 times, you've created 500 new homes and saved almost 900 acres of farmland while using up only 125. And when you build with density, the developer is happy to pay for their own infrastructure, so your taxpayers aren't stuck with that bill. And we've repeated, preserve the land and protect the taxpayers enough and enough and enough that township trustees, and as importantly, their constituents, have come to understand that building with density is actually a good thing. So we're convincing our local leaders to build with density and preserve the land. Protecting the taxpayers is more complicated. It involves using new community authorities or NCAs, which I heard referenced earlier. A new community authority allows a local governmental entity to establish a different taxing district specifically on a new development. The model we're using in Fairfield County is to apply 5 mills of property tax and 2 points of income tax only on the new residents or businesses. No additional tax on your current residents, no additional tax on your current taxpayers. Only the new people moving in will pay more. Some of our township trustees are now referring to this as a development tax. And a new community authority can generate real dollars. Our estimate is that about a 200-unit single-family housing development will, when fully built, generate up to $2 million a year every year. Let me say that again. $2 million per year, every year for 200 homes. Some of that money will go back into the neighborhood. The significant majority of it will be used for roads, fire departments, schools, whatever that community needs most. And the way we're approaching this is a bit unique. We're working with townships and municipalities to create partnerships to share the revenues generated by each NCA. Here's an example. Our county seat, Lancaster, has grown into 4 different townships that surround it: Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, Southwest. For years, the city and the townships have fought over annexations and growth policies, with townships unsuccessfully trying to build a wall that will stop the growth of the city. The city, for its part, would conform the boundaries with each new annexation, in essence, eating up the surrounding townships. And this was honestly going on all around our counties. Pickerington has grown exponentially, and each village, as it looks to grow, is seen as the enemy by the surrounding or adjacent township. What we're doing now is the antithesis of that history. As the county, we are hosting a series of meetings between municipalities and townships, asking them to put aside generations of history to form a partnership that will benefit them both. So here's how that partnership works. We make an agreement for significant swaths of land that says that anything that's developed in the township part of that map will have an NCA, as I referenced earlier, and that all the incremental taxes generated by that NCA, remember the $2 million per year, all that goes into a pot. And the same will be true for any land that the municipality annexes. That revenue generated by the NCA on the city or village side will go into that same pot. And that pot of money will be split up like this. 40% of the money will go to the township. 40% of the money will go to the municipality. 10% will go back into the NCA for parks, trails, etc. And the last 10% will go to the school system that the land is developed in. So regardless if development occurs within the township or is annexed into the city or village, everybody shares. The primary thought behind this is to stop the land wars, to take away the ability of the developer to play the township against the village or the village against the township. We're defining these partnerships with both an NCA agreement and a cooperative economic development agreement, CETA. That CETA defines the geographic area that will be in the NCA. It will identify areas that are likely to be annexed and those that are likely not to be annexed. And it defines how the money will be split up. So instead of spending countless resources on unsuccessful wars, both legal and financial, we are asking municipalities and townships to jointly sign CETAs and NCAs. And it's working. Before we get to the results, let's talk about the schools for a minute. We all know that nothing will get a school district riled up like talk of bringing new homes to the area. Now, it sounds like you may have a different situation here, but in Fairfield County, if you say we're bringing 200 new homes, school superintendent's first one to jump up and say, whoa, 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 wait a minute, we can't afford that. We're out of room and we have no money. That's what the superintendents usually say. The idea behind our NCA, carving out that 10% for the schools, the idea is that the incremental taxes gathered on new residential development will pay for the operational costs of the new students that come in with the new housing. And the NCA dollars that are collected on commercial and industrial development where no new students come from will pay for the capital costs needed to eventually add on to existing schools or build new ones. All of this NCA revenue is in addition to the incremental taxes that the school district will collect on the newly developed land, significantly more than when it was farmed. All this sounds good in theory, right? Well, it's working. As I sit here tonight, we are weeks away from finalizing agreements between the city of Lancaster and Greenfield Township, the village of Thurston and Walnut Township, the village of Millersport and Walnut Township, the village of Baltimore and Liberty Township. And we're ready to take the model we've built, the NCA documents, the CETA documents, and the financial model into discussions with Lancaster and Hocking Township, Lancaster and Pleasant Township, Lancaster and Vernon Township, Thurston and Liberty Township, Pleasantville and Walnut Township, the list goes on. Everybody's coming on board. It's working. Sorry, I'm almost done, but not yet. There's one more piece to it. The county funded the creation of a model zoning code written by our regional planning commission to be in line with our comprehensive plan that again is being provided to the villages and townships for free so they can update their zoning to match the land use plan that they're adopting based on the land use plan we created. That model zoning was adopted in December, and we've already got 2 villages to adopt their version of it, with others, townships and villages both asking for help from our regional planning commission to adapt the model zoning code to fit their needs. The bottom line is this: most plans like this sit on a shelf and are rarely referred to or used. The one we had before this, I didn't even know it existed. The key to our long-term success is to have each township and each village have their own version of a land use plan and to update their zoning to match that plan and to do the hard work of creating partnerships with each other. So when development comes, and it already is, they're ready. They can plan for it now, manage it when it comes, and take advantage of it so that generations of Knox County residents won't be asked to vote for a road levy, fire levy, or school levy ever. Thank you again for having me here tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I can hear a lot when you say this. The different government entities need to work cooperatively together.
Yes, sir. It's not easy.
No.
So Jeff to the right, Jeff, thank you, Jeff.
Of course.
And I assume we can have a written copy of that. It's not.
Just for you, Bill.
So with Liberty Crossing, does it have an NCA?
Yes.
Yeah.
We put the.
And a chip, and has residential chip.
The city has its own NCA. Ours is set up a little differently, like the city boundaries is the NCA. Theirs, they do them, I think, by project, right?
Right, so
Yeah.
we're actually taking school district boundaries and saying that within this township, adjacent to this village, any development that happens within this school district fits into this NCA. So we know that that 10% is going to that school district. Some of our townships have 5 or 6 different school districts that are a part of them. So it makes it more, there's more work to be done, but we're We're cautiously optimistic that within the next 2 years, Fairfield County will be covered with NCAs and that any development that occurs will generate significant tax dollars.
Mr. Fix, there was some other implementation, maybe you mentioned this, but the subdivision regulations as well.
Right, so, yeah, so Jamie mentioned we're all, competing and we are. There's so much that to go around that, it's like pizza shops, right? You bring another pizza shop and there's plenty of other people that are looking to buy pizza.
We use oil change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. We had our county engineer update all of his regulations, our county utilities department update all their regulations. Our subdivision regulations were updated, the model zoning was created. The idea, Jeannie referenced it, every time that I talk to developers, the phrase that they use is certainty of execution. If they know what the rules are, and they know what the fee schedule is, and they know what the process is, and they know that you're not going to try to change the rules on them halfway through, they're happy to make a mathematical decision on whether or not they're going to invest in your community. If things are a little dicey and they don't know what the rules are, or they're not clear, or they don't know what the process is or what the fees are, they're going to take their money somewhere else. And because all of us are looking for new development to take care of the people that, are coming to our community, they can take their money anywhere. Right? So we wanted to be crystal clear with all of the processes and procedures and codes, so that there was no question what the rules were.
Commissioner, do you have a timeline of how long the maintenance happens? You see money comes, I know incentives to bring people to the area and give the abatement, tax abatements. We're talking to bring more taxes into the area, but about how long are you scheduling, I guess, those abatements so that that money does start to come back to the community?
We're not doing a big.
Not in things, okay.
So a lot of our thoughts and concerns were in Justin's character. What do things look like? And I appreciate the concept that 400 to 800 feet off the road, that's what your county looks like. And that's what people see. And that's good information. But and we're also thinking about, when things are built in town, what are they going to look like? Are you addressing that in any way, or are those the concerns of your citizens?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and that's all in that model zoning, right? So Jamie referenced character types, and we went through the same process with the organization. I think we had 22 different character types that we use in our land use plan. In those character types, you define what it's going to look like, what the setbacks are, how big the lots. I mean, all of the details that define how you want this to look are all in those character types, which then you turn into your zone. And that zoning then dictates if someone's going to build there.
So even down to like design standards, so material use, those kind of things.
Not, that won't be in your land use plan, that'll be in your zoning code. But
I don't think you should ever uncouple the D words, the density and design, right? I mean, because what we find regularly is that people, density is just a calculation. What they care most about is, what does it look like? Where's it positioned? Does it address the street? Does it not address it? Where's the parking? So I think we, a lot of times we don't even use talk about design quality. We don't talk about the density because it's just an output. So I would, as you're talking about what this looks like, I think being mindful for that, the density word, the annexation word are usually want to get us in trouble wherever we go. But design quality means everything. We did, some of you are probably familiar with Upper Arlington, who hadn't done a plan in 40 years where the most cherished value is maintaining the status quo. At the end of that planning process, they increased the intensity by a factor of 3 in all their non-residential, like the FAR, floor area ratio by a factor of 3. It had everything to do with design and virtually nothing to do with the calculation about what it yielded. And it has a fiscal impact that was really powerful for our landlocked suburban community.
Commissioner, it sounds to me like your plan has kind of alleviated the bad annexation of that, right?
The plan doesn't do that. The agreements between townships and villages will do that. It's, listen, the townships aren't all of a sudden embracing all the villages and cities with open arms. There's, hundreds of years of bad words between them. But because they recognize that, look, there's parts of this township that I can develop, and there's parts that I know you're gonna annex because you can't. If they put it all together, everybody wins and they stop fighting over the land, right? So it's not an easy sell to when you start the conversation, but if you keep at it and keep them coming back to the table and, the first meeting, maybe 2 meetings, they're just venting out all the stuff that their grandfather, he hated my grandfather. Seriously, that stuff goes on. You gotta get it out and get it all out on the table, and then you start talking business, right? And really, for us, I don't know what your situation is here, but so many of our townships struggle to keep firemen on board because they can't afford to pay them. Struggle to pave their roads every year, pave even a mile or two of road, township roads every year. They do tar and chip instead of, paving. God forbid they try to buy a new fire truck, right? When you talk about doing this kind of work and working cooperatively, and now they're looking at, on one single development, $800,000 a year. Now all of a sudden that stuff, they can pay a fireman. And in 2 years, they can buy a new fire truck. And it just changes the dynamic, right? When you start talking business and how, if they do it right, they'll never, ever, ever have to go back to their taxpayers and ask for more money. That.
Just in Licking County, in those 15 jurisdictions closest to Intel, like the most significant thing for them is about fiscal health. How does this happen in a way where they can actually benefit? And it's not clear, with the crazy rules that we have in Ohio, like you have to figure out, like Fairfield has, how to work these programs that overcome the underlying, systemic things that are broken here, right? They should have to do that. And they've done a great job of trying to figure out that and find the win-wins for their communities, so they can be fiscally healthy, so they can invest in the things that they need for their communities. But it's not easy at all. I know, Council, we're over the time, but I think we want to maybe ask Matt to sort of close some.
Well, Commissioner Fix, always good to see you. Thanks for coming and sharing that experience because there are a lot of things that we've been experiencing here. I had flashbacks to a municipal planning commission meeting sitting there. So anyway, I wrote down notes as a lot of you were talking. I wanted to just kind of let you know where we were as a city, where we were as the community at this particular point in time. First of all, Bruce's question, how do people afford to live here with all of the growth that's happening and how much it costs to do that? Well, that's what we do have a lot of things that we touched on. We have incentives in place. One of the things that we've been able to do very successfully, and thank you, Council, for adopting the zoning code. We know that is working because the appeals, we used to have anywhere between 3 to 5 appeals cases twice a month. Up until June or July, I think, whenever we adopted it, we've had, I think, 2 meetings since then. So it's been redesigned, and we've got the government out of the way. And we're allowing for more private investment and related to the investment, similar to what Vernon, you were asking about abatements. We do offer abatements for our community investment area. And that we can go over particulars later. It's a range, it's a percentage. But when council adopted that CRA, citywide CRA, the 2022 private investment in 2022, not even a full year, $2.8 million private investment. In 2023, I think Sam said, I don't know, Jeff, Sam said it was like over 5.8 million. And so we're making it attractive for people to build accessory dwelling units, loft spaces, places for those more affordable homes that fit on the continuum. So you don't have to start out buying a single family home. And if you can't afford an apartment, there may be some places where there's
a detached home or accessory cabin or something in the backyard or something like that. That maybe your mother-in-law stays at or something like that too, you know. Anyway, so we are seeing that the NCA is been a godsend for us too. While it hasn't started generating revenues, we're near the end of adopting or accepting Island Real Estate into the incorporation, into the organization, and we will have that. So the idea is to pay for the infrastructure up front so that we can start filling homes. We've got a very motivated builder right now who wants to get things going. So that's going to help out. Your CETA counselor, I think, is very closely similar to what we've been talking a little bit about a JED district or Joint Economic Development District. Maybe some nuances there, but I'll tell you, when we were doing the data collection together, the West End lit up like a Christmas tree. There was no question. You don't need, it's not rocket science to figure that out. So we knew we needed to start planning before this plan was actually adopted in order to kind of turn things around. And so we have been investing a lot of energy, a lot of money, and a lot of time in the West End, but also where does somebody on the West End go to buy a gallon of milk? They gotta go to the gas station, or they gotta walk across the railroad tracks, or in the road to go over to Baker's. So we start talking about those economic amenities, having people be able to get to and from the grocery store is gonna be great. And so those are the things that we are really looking at, particularly on that West End. We also knew Stockton Avenue lit up like a Christmas tree as well, with the traffic. And so that's something as part of transportation that we're looking at. Back to, the character type stuff. Mr. Mann, you had mentioned something about the character types. One of the things I really like about what this plan does is explain those, showing pictures. Because with our zoning code, while we now have no pictures in it, we don't have necessarily character types. And so this document can offer a very nice functional support to someone who wants to develop on vacant lots per se. And so this is the type of homes or homes that I would like to see. If we are planning for density, density is our way. If in fact, circling back to you, we've got to make it affordable for people to live here. And that means it's more than just the single family residence. Okay, back to talked about building with density. Another thing that is very important about this is what the commission says, if you don't plan for growth, then growth will happen to you. Those suburbs that are outside of Pickerington city limits aren't providing Pickerington with any of their income tax unless they're working in there. So guess what? They're using their roads, they're using their parks, they're using their amenities, and then Pickerington doesn't get the benefit of those tax dollars, which is it's painful. It's painful for me to hear that, and so that's why it's always been important to create new revenue streams by the infill, and that's where I think Fredericktown, Centerburg, Danville, Gambier, and Mount Vernon certainly can absorb that growth, grow inward, and not have to have those striated development along the main corridors to the city. We're happy to do that, not for selfish purposes alone, but for also to address the values that we have all discovered here. So now let's see. This also is. I want to address here. Does this lock us into anything? It does not. This is something. I'm a former football coach, and now that we have a lieutenant governor who's a football coach, I'm going to use a football analogy here. Every football team has a game plan. You have to start with something. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to follow that game plan if you continue running into a line that is knocking you down everywhere you go. You have to make adjustments, but you have to have a plan. You have to start somewhere, and you can make adjustments along the way. And so that's what this does. That's what this provides for us.
And the non-binding nature of this allows us the opportunity to call those audibles when we need to. But we have an idea of where we want to develop, how we want to develop, where we want to draw those. I wouldn't say lines of demarcation, but certainly this is where we think we want to continue to grow over the next 25 years. Let's see, the regional approach that Jamie talked about. I'm looking at with regard to your comment on sidewalks and bike paths. It was, and thank you, Steve, for bringing it. It was very much a priority. Sidewalks and bike paths were very much a priority when we did our strategic plan. Fourth graders and fifth graders want. And so the grandparents, they want to hop on a bike, take the grandkids into town, get some ice cream, go to the park and ride back. It's very important, that developments. And guess what? Liberty Crossing is going to be riding bike paths. We're working with them on the sidewalks to connect them as well. Any new development out on Upper Gilchrist Road, we're going to have avenue sidewalks and on one side maybe a multi-use path, which is all we're also incorporating with our stormwater to handle that part. So, and again, getting growth, pay for growth is incredibly important. As someone also mentioned, one of the interesting things about, I think, I can't remember who brought it up. One of the more innovative housing developments that we have had in Mount Vernon, I think, is the Area Agency on Aging District 5 development next to Department of Commerce Park. That is brilliant because it allows 8 different senior fixed income living opportunities with wraparound services to age in place. This is on the west end, and it makes it affordable for people who are seniors to not have to leave the west end if they don't want to. I think that is a model, honestly, that every neighborhood should probably be looking at if we want to have our seniors to be able to age in place. And now with a more flexible zoning code and with the character types that are provided in here, I think we're right to make that happen. It's just, Councilman, you said it's the attitudes. It's the NIMBYism. That's what we have to do with it. We're facing growth, and we are going to have to come together and see, is this really how we feel about density? Is this really how we feel about quality? Because you gotta pick one or the other. You can't have both. Predictability was the other thing. I'm sorry, I'll wrap up. I know we're longer. I'm sorry to resist one. Predictability is the other thing that when I meet with developers, they want to know if it's predictable from start to finish, and that's it. There are no surprises along the way. So it can take longer than what people might like, but as long as it's predictable, they're fine. And I could go on, but you guys get the picture. I would just echo a lot of what Commissioner Fix has said, what he's running into. We all have experienced that very well. We're sitting in good shape, guys. I really think so. This is a solid, in my opinion.
Can't throw this way in here.
So I'm just gonna close by saying thank you for everybody for giving your time tonight. I know we went a little bit over, but I really appreciate you coming together on this. When I was first appointed to council, they were like, go meet with Jeff Dockey. And the first thing he pointed me to was the comprehensive plan. And I think 2 weeks later, when I was like, the comprehensive plan, he was just amazed that I read the thing. But it is so helpful to read these documents. And I think that having them as our, shining light, our lampposts of where we're going is really important. So I'm sure the conversation will continue. But for that, we will stay dismissed for the night.